It starts with an inheritance you weren't supposed to receive yet. Your father is alive. Technically. He is in a private hospital in Geneva that doesn't appear on any public directory, maintained by a staff whose NDAs have NDAs, declining in a way that the family's lawyers describe as ongoing, and the family's doctors describe as irreversible, and that you, at 26, describe to no one, because there is no language for watching someone become a formality while their empire waits. The empire doesn't wait well. 3 weeks after the board votes to transfer operational authority, you are sitting in a chair that cost more than your first apartment, in a building that has its own postal code, signing documents that make you, on paper, the wealthiest individual in recorded human history. The lawyer slides the final page across the desk. You sign it. He says, "Congratulations." You look at the word on the page above your signature. Trillionaire is not a word that exists in most dictionaries yet. The world made it for people like your father. Now, it belongs to you. You ask if there's coffee. There is. Of course there is. There will always, from this point forward, be coffee. Level 1. The weight of the number. A trillion is not a large number the way a mountain is large, something you can see from a distance and comprehend by looking. A trillion is large the way infinity is large, theoretically, structurally, in ways your brain processes as a concept rather than a quantity. You have tried, in the first weeks, to make it real. A trillion seconds is 31,000 years. $1 trillion, stacked in $100 bills, would reach a third of the way to the moon. You stop doing this exercise because it isn't helping. What helps, marginally, is the work. The empire is not one thing. It is a collection of things. Energy infrastructure, satellite networks, pharmaceutical supply chains, deep-sea mining operations, a social media platform with more daily users than any country has citizens. Each division has a head. Each head has a team. Each team has problems that have been waiting for someone with your last name to look at them. You look at them. All of them. You work 18 hours a day for the first 3 months because working is the only part of this that feels like something a normal person would do. Your assistant schedules your meals. Your security team schedules your routes. Your communications director schedules your words, occasionally, which you accept because you have learned in 3 months that at this scale, unscheduled words have consequences that require their own team to manage. You are surrounded at all times by people whose entire professional purpose is to anticipate what you need. You have never been lonelier in your life. Level 2. The geopolitics of showing up. The first head of state calls 6 weeks in, not to congratulate you, to remind you, delicately, of the infrastructure contracts your father signed with his government, and the upcoming election, and the way that certain energy pricing decisions could be interpreted in the current political climate as a preference for one outcome over another. You listen. You say you'll have your people follow up. You hang up and sit with the call for a while. Your father, you're told by people who knew him, had a rule. He would meet with any government, but endorse none. He would do business with any regime, but fund none. He stayed above, which is a position that requires enormous wealth to maintain and even greater discipline to believe. You inherit the position without the discipline yet. The second call comes from a different continent, a different leader, different language, same underlying message. Your infrastructure is in our country. Our country is about to make decisions. We thought you should know. By the fourth call, you understand what this is. You are not being informed. You are being recruited. Every government that has a piece of your empire in its territory has done the math. You have more economic leverage than most multilateral institutions, more data than most intelligence agencies, more reach than most militaries. They all want to be the country you like best. You hire a geopolitical advisory team, which is a thing you didn't know existed as a private service until you needed one, and which costs more per month than most countries spend on foreign aid, which is a sentence you sit with for a moment and then file away in the folder labeled things to think about later. Level 3. The corruption you don't notice. It happens in small increments, which is how it always happens. The first compromise is practical. A government threatening to nationalize your energy assets in their country unless certain contracts are renegotiated in their favor. Your lawyers say, fight it. Your advisors say, pay it. You pay it. Because the alternative costs more and takes longer. And you have 37 other countries with their hands out, and you cannot afford to make an example of this one right now. The second compromise is political. A regulatory decision in a major market that would significantly affect your satellite division. You know someone who knows someone. A conversation happens in a room you're not in, through intermediaries you have plausible distance from. The decision goes differently than expected. You don't ask about the details. This is either wisdom or cowardice, and you've stopped being sure which. The third compromise is personal. A journalist is working on a story. Not a wrong story. A story that is largely accurate about decisions made in your first year that you made for what felt like good reasons, and which look, assembled in a narrative with context you weren't thinking about at the time, considerably worse. Your communications director presents you with options. You choose the one that makes the story go away. None of these feel like corruption while they're happening. They feel like management, like the reasonable exercise of available tools in response to real problems. This, you will understand later, is precisely what corruption feels like from the inside. Not villainous, just practical, repeated, incrementally normalized, until the person who would have been disturbed by the first decision is no longer the person making decisions.
Level 4. The ideology of scale.
Somewhere in year 2, you start having thoughts that concern you slightly. Not evil thoughts, structural ones. You look at a government's climate policy and think about how you could implement the same outcome faster, more efficiently, without the procedural friction of democratic deliberation. You look at a humanitarian crisis and calculate what a fraction of your quarterly earnings could do to resolve it. And then you calculate why it hasn't been resolved. And the answer is political will. And you have, it occurs to you, considerably more leverage on political will than most actors in the situation. You start doing things, good things, mostly. A water infrastructure initiative in 3 countries. A renewable energy program that several governments adopt because you've made it cheaper than the alternative. A disease research fund that produces results in 18 months that public health systems haven't produced in a decade. The press calls you visionary. Several governments give you awards. A magazine puts you on a cover with a headline about the future of philanthropy. You read it on a plane and feel something that takes you a while to identify. It's not pride exactly. It's the specific satisfaction of a person who has decided they know better and been proven right. Which is fine, when you're right. The problem with that feeling is, it doesn't come with an automatic alert for when you stop being right. It just keeps feeling the same. You hire a former prime minister as an advisor, then another. You have opinions about geopolitical situations that you express in private briefings with sitting governments, and the governments listen and occasionally act on what you've said, which is either you using your resources responsibly or something else entirely. You're no longer sure where that line is. You're also no longer sure who in your life would tell you if you crossed it. Level 5. The isolation of being right. The people around you have changed. Not dramatically, gradually. The friends who would have told you difficult things have been replaced through a slow process of attrition you didn't notice until it was complete, by people whose professional survival depends on your approval. You didn't fire anyone. You just stopped calling people back who pushed back too hard, and eventually they stopped calling. Your inner circle is brilliant, capable, and entirely too agreeable. You make a decision in a board meeting that 3 people in the room privately believe is wrong. You find this out 6 months later from a source outside the room. When you ask why no one said anything at the time, the answer you get, carefully worded, amounts to, because you seemed certain. You were certain. You were also wrong. The decision costs you a significant amount that you don't need, and a significant amount of credibility in a region you do. You sit with this for a day. The old version of you, the 26-year-old signing papers and asking for coffee, would have been rattled by being wrong. The current version is mostly annoyed at the information management failure. You want to know why the feedback loop broke. You examine this reaction for a while. You don't entirely like what you find. Level 6, the reckoning. The UN report comes out on a Tuesday. It doesn't name you. It doesn't need to. It describes, in the careful language of international institutions, the concentration of critical global infrastructure in private hands, the risks of single points of failure, the democratic accountability gap when decisions affecting hundreds of millions of people are made by entities answerable to no electorate. You read it on a Tuesday morning with your coffee, and you recognize yourself in it with the specific discomfort of seeing an unflattering photograph taken from an angle you didn't know existed. You call a meeting with your advisory team. You present the report. You ask for honest responses. You get careful ones, which is its own answer. You sit in the chair your father sat in the building with its own postal code, and do the math that isn't about money. What you have, what it costs the world for you to have it. What responsible looks like at a scale that has no precedent, and therefore no established definition. The math stays open. Level 7. The question with no answer. Yet, you are 29 now, 3 years into a number that still doesn't feel real. 3 years into a version of yourself you're still negotiating with. You haven't become a villain. You've checked. You care about things that matter. You've done good with a fraction of what you have. The water infrastructure works. The disease fund works. People are alive who wouldn't be. You've also made compromises you can't fully justify. Accumulated influence you can't fully account for. Become someone whose certainty has outpaced their wisdom in ways that nobody around you is positioned to correct. Both of these things are true. You sit on a balcony above a city that contains, within its borders, 17 different pieces of infrastructure you own, and watch the lights come on at dusk with the particular complexity of a person who understands, finally, that power at this scale is not a destination. It's a condition, one that requires constant management, constant interrogation, constant willingness to hear things you'd rather not, from people brave enough to say them, who you have to actively cultivate, because they don't grow naturally in the soil of your current life. You make a call, not to a government, not to an advisor, to someone who knew you before the chair, before the papers, before the word that isn't in most dictionaries yet. Someone who will tell you the truth because they have nothing to lose by doing so. They answer on the third ring. You say you need an honest conversation. They say it's about time. You agree.